Welcome to episode 267 of the Working Fans Podcast, where today we are going to talk Jey Uso winning the IC title, the 5th anniversary show, Eddie Guerrero, Owen Hart Grand Slam, the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary, and Dave, it's like I got 3 computers in my brain. One pays attention to work, one pays attention to family, and the third pays attention to fun with Game Up Hard Hydration. It's your favorite seltzer, your favorite sports drink, got together, had a baby, but it's so much better. Dave, tell them why we love Game Up.
Dude, we got 4 great flavors. Let's start off with that. We got fruit punch, we got orange, we got lemon lime, your personal favorite grape. And guys, it's only 110 calories per can. It's low carb. If that's not enough reason to buy Game Up, buy it because they're our sponsor. Come on.
And they have sponsored the 5th year of the Working Fans Podcast. But Dave, it is about that time of year again. I believe the date is September 29th of the first episode. What a long road it's been. What changes have come. What are your thoughts on 5 years? Did you even realize it?
Nope. Actually, when I got in the studio and I saw 5th year anniversary, the way my brain works, I didn't even really read the whole thing. And I thought, oh, yeah, the 5th year of AEW Dynamite's coming up. I'm like, why didn't we talk about this yesterday as one of the subjects? I don't remember doing that. But I'm like, whatever, he wants to go with it. And then you said right before we went on 5 years, and I'm like, oh, us, shit. I was like, damn, that snuck up on me. No, it doesn't feel like 5 years at all in a lot of ways. Like there are times when things will drag, but for the most part, I'd say this 5 years has flown by. And it's wild to think that because, we both have lost parents throughout this thing. And we've had some very interesting moments, whether it's interviewing, special guests, whether it's like, me, my current relationship and the kids in my life, this stuff out of work and stuff like just happening like on the podcast. It's just been a wild, wild ride. And I hope it's just beginning, honestly.
Yeah, it was. You talk about how wild the 5th year was. We've been putting in this work for so much time. This is the first year I think we realized that summers and this podcast are almost incompatible. Right now we're putting ourselves back into a content creation circle. Mm-hmm. Life is so much different since when we started this. God, even just the structure of the podcast, I don't know if we've talked about it publicly, but there was a text to a group text this year that I accidentally sent that, really fucked things up. And AJ realized like he could do the thing more part-time. And, I felt terrible about that, but it did kind of, it settled things out where we've been coming out more consistently. We're going to have AJ on the watch alongs. We've talked about it in private. I don't know how much we've brought it up publicly, but I wanted to bring it up because it was a big change to this podcast. And it did, it's the beginning of this era, which has been, shorts coming out daily, videos coming out almost daily, live shows, watch alongs. I've been going back and listening to old segments we've done where remember when we were just the phone on your kitchen table, Dave? Mm-hmm. And then we decided to move to the podcast room. And then we caught up with Everything Entertainment and became a video podcast. And that started things. But this year has been our biggest growth. Like February to May, we had unreal growth. And that's just the business of things, I guess.
And TikTok has definitely been a real fun source too for us as well. They've really come on strong, and even though I think they were stronger in that time period you mentioned, but I think we've realized too that there's a lot of potential growth there. Yeah,
It's just like anything. If you want the garden to grow, you have to water it. And I've
you do have
noticed that
that
going
work.
away from TikTok, we have to get that work back in to get that audience back with us. People still are fans of us there, people that watched us earlier in the year, but to start gaining new people, it's just putting that hustle back in.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You talked to me about Patreon yesterday afterwards and what might be interesting for like a Patreon. And I guess I'll just tell you this on air because I had a thought. Because at first I was thinking like, I don't know, what the fuck we're gonna do, But then I thought about it, like especially on TikTok, we've seen some growth there, and anyone listening to us on YouTube as well, though. I think Patreon, we could do some tiers where if you're interested, and you want to give us X amount of money, we'll figure that out later, and you want to be on our Patreon, that maybe we could do stuff where we could have you on the podcast for episodes. Maybe you could sit on a roundtable discussion, like on these In Your House or some of these other pay-per-view events we've done, or maybe just a topic you want to talk about. Maybe there could be a tier where you pick a topic that we could talk about, and we could have that discussion, whatever it is. If you're going to give us money, we'll talk about whatever, Chris Benoit, you name it, Well, I mean, we don't really shy away from stuff anyway too much here, but, usually it's got to be worth my interest. But if you're willing to cough up with some dough and you think we're worth it, then hell yeah, I'll give you the platform and love to talk to you about it. So.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe on one tier, do an extra recording a week. We've been doing these show reviews. Maybe the show reviews move to the basic level of Patreon. Then yours could be the next level up. We're talking Patreon because in the 5 years, the only way we've gotten money is Game Up Hard Hydration. And
A little bit.
we want to get better at bringing something in.
Yeah. Not a crazy amount on TikTok, but for the shout out to the people, there have been people who've donated some money to us on TikTok.
Oh yeah, TikTok has come through as well. Like, yeah, social media and Game Up, that's the only things that have paid us. And, I feel better doing a Patreon trying to bring in money. And, Game Up has come on strong, come on hard this year. And you could tell I botched that transition because talking about coming on strong, we've been talking about NXT loading up for these CW shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say, what the fuck? I watched till the last couple minutes of NXT thinking there's nothing more that can happen. Oh, Roxanne's gonna talk? I don't need to see this at like 9:55.
Yeah.
And then the debut. And I'm like, holy shit, they are swinging for the fences with this CW debut.
Yeah. Stephanie Vaquer makes an appearance, on the screen. She wasn't there in person, but she does make an appearance. And she's basically saying she's looking at meeting the winner of Julia and Roxanne Perez. And that makes you wonder if she's going to play a part of this CW show. She's definitely was teased. But yeah, they set up this CW show nicely. We had the great back and forth with Wesley and
Zachary Wentz there.
Zachary Wentz, thank you. Breaking out his name. Zachary Wentz. And, they're swearing at each other. It's bleeped up, but it was almost similar to that one that Matt Riddle had a few years ago. Yeah.
Seth Rollins, I believe.
Seth Rollins, yeah. And, this was obviously a play off of John Jones and Daniel Cormier in the UFC and MMA stratosphere. They had done this originally. So, those are always good in moderation. You like to see those. And, I thought they're doing a great job of building that street fight. There's a good history there. Obviously, the big thing besides this women's title match is going to be Ethan Page and Trick Williams with CM Punk as the special referee. We got Punk in Chicago for this. So, I mean, this is just going to be a fun, big show. We're loading up, and I got a feeling we're going to have some surprises. I'm going to guess the Motor City Machine Guns are going to pop on this show as well.
I could definitely see it. Like, I've been loving NXT more and more as it goes on. We've been talking about it forever with the women's division, but then you've got a show where there's like 5-6 different feuds. You've got, the hot up-and-comer Javon Evans, like, getting opportunities. You got Hank and Tank going against one of the more established tag teams in the division this prior week in the Good Brothers. And there's just There's so much to be enjoyed. We don't have to dwell on this too much because we've been talking about it for a while.
Mhm.
Another thing we've been talking about for a while finally
Ye-
happened. I did not think this was going to happen. Jey Uso wins the Intercontinental Championship. How surprised were you by this? Because I couldn't believe it.
I wasn't that surprised as the show was rolling and the match was rolling on, where he was really kind of built up as this impossible underdog. That's kind of wrestling 101. Like when they start doing that, usually that means okay, like he's gonna pull this off. But I just thought that Braun Breaker just won that Intercontinental title. Sammy didn't have a long reign, but we've been into like longer reigns now, and I thought, okay, we're establishing Braun here. That being said, I think I said this in a group text too. Braun has been getting babyface like responses at different times. And I do wonder if we're going to be setting up Braun Breaker maybe to wrestle Gunther at some point. And maybe he's going to not get necessarily a world title run, but get a world title program. And maybe that's why there's going to be different things for him. So at the same time, we're going to establish Jey as the Intercontinental Champion here. I'm interested to see if Jey Uso is going to be a part of this War Games that's coming up at Survivor Series. I mean, we got time, but like, is he going to end up being on a team with Cody? He's on Raw, kind of away from everybody else, but boy, it makes sense for him to be involved in that bloodline feud. But here he is with the Intercontinental title, kind of doing his own thing.
Yeah. I haven't watched the match yet because I will tell you how I discovered this. And it's a great thing about doing a podcast. You don't realize when you're checking your YouTube blindly that you might get a spoiler. And then when I see it, I'm like, all right, I'm good. I will go back and watch it, but it's one of those things I always think to send a message, and then I'm like, nah, I'll avoid social media. And I didn't. And another place that happened with is the group chat we're always talking about made AEW Grand Slam interesting because I started it a little behind. Obviously, Danielson McGuinness, I thought great opening. We finally got to see this match. What did you think of Danielson McGuinness? Did it live up to the hype that it had in your head?
No, I liked it, but I wouldn't say I wasn't. I guess I just had reminiscent of like the old Ring of Honor matches I've seen, and that wasn't that. But I definitely liked it. I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed just seeing Nigel out there. I enjoyed the ending with Nigel saying thank you as he was tapping out. I thought that was so poetic, and Jim Ross right on it too. Is he saying he's screaming thank you? And
See, I thought it was fuck you because there was like, if you notice, there was like a loud sound edit right around that time where they were cutting in the crowd noise.
Yeah, that would have made more sense, honestly. But everybody seemed to say that he was saying thank you and stuff I picked up. So, but actually, I kind of like what you said a little bit more. And they did edit some of the language he had at different times in that match too. So
I'm sure he's saying thank you privately, but
right in that moment though. Yeah, I wonder. Interesting. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see Nigel on commentary for Collision this week. I didn't see any spoilers. I know we're getting a lot of Grand Slam matches on Collision as well. Moxley versus Darby Allin to me, the bump on the floor, I thought that was insane. Moxley winning is interesting to me because now is Moxley going to be the one to retire Danielson as a full-time performer, or it's just Danielson's going to keep rolling? I mean, that would have been a great moment for Darby to challenge the title out there, on the West Coast, where Darby's from.
yeah.
The great story and great match with the Bucks versus Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. I thought this was phenomenal. Kyle Fletcher's top rope brainbuster where he dropped one of the Bucks on his head with that brainbuster looked incredible. Great matchup. The story continues. We're building. It looks like maybe a match between Fletcher and Ospreay at this point. We said a little dissension there. Yeah, those are probably my highlights of the show, I would say.
Yeah, how about the debut of MVP? When I saw him come out, I was wondering what the next debut is. Does he have Lashley behind him? Is this somehow bringing in Shane? Like, it wasn't the debut I expected, but I really like it.
Yeah, no, I like it, and I like the potential of it right now. I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's just potential right now. But MVP, talking to Strickland and talking to Nana and saying, hey, this reflects Strickland's management, and give him a business card when he's ready to get serious. It does make me wonder if he'd be feuding with MVP and maybe a potential Hurt Business, or maybe he'll be part of a potential Hurt Business. And do we get Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, which is what I'd really like to see.
Oh, shit. I didn't even think about Shelton Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we get to our last two segments of the day, since it's the 5th anniversary show, I want to play that commercial that Dave and I enjoy so much.
Hey fans, it's the man they call Dave with producer Joe, and you probably know us as the commentary team for New Heights Pro Wrestling, but when we're not doing that, we got a podcast.
That is the Working Fans Podcast, where we talk pro wrestling, comedy, MMA, and so much more.
And tell them about that signature segment.
Oh, you talk about the 531?
You know I am.
That is a homegrown creation that has been our namesake. And if you want to know our namesake, we got Chevy, AJ Strange Brew, as well as the two of us.
And why don't you go to our channel, like, subscribe, show us some love.
Rate, review, all of it.
All of it.
Always a fun time. And we're moving into the last two segments. We are going to finish the show by talking about the McMahon documentary.
Sure.
Our general thoughts on it, because we're going to go episode by episode, give you a breakdown, like almost every wrestling podcast, I'm sure it is. But there is so much gold to be mined here. And if you want to talk about gold, we're going to talk about two of the best in-ring. Dave put up the comparison, Eddie Guerrero, Owen Hart. I really like this, both from wrestling families, both undersized guys in the business overall, but especially in WWE or WWF, where you'd think it'd be impossible for them to get over. They both did it. Dave, which of these two do you favor?
Oh, man, it's so tough. I think I'm more of an Owen Hart guy because it's just a different time in my childhood where I just really, really liked Owen. I even loved the Blue Blazer, originally when he came out. I love all that stuff. But Eddie is such a phenomenal competitor, and his personality really, I said this before on other podcasts, where a lot of really, really great complete wrestlers kind of got lost in WWE, that didn't have personality. Eddie was just the opposite. Eddie really developed his personality in WWE, and he still kept all his wrestling, and he just shined in that environment. And I think it's funny. I'm probably a mark for titles. And when I always think of some of the greats, I think of how many championships they've won, or how long they've had it. But Eddie, he passed away prematurely. But when I just look at that run he had in WWE, and I look at him in the ring and what he could do, there's no doubt in my mind, this guy's one of the best, much like a Terry Funk. And Owen's right there too. And like I said, maybe I favor him a little bit more just because that part of my childhood. But if I'm going to be truly unbiased about it, man, I got to lean towards Eddie as far as better bell to bell. And that's no slight on Owen. It's just that Eddie's he's tip top in my book.
Very good in the ring. Obviously, I've seen a little more Owen than Eddie, so I'm kind of the same with you on that. I would have to go back and watch some Eddie matches to, make a fair decision. Because, I just watched Owen and Bulldog today, and just seeing how good Owen was in there and, what made him great. We're going to be doing some Halloween Havocs coming up. So I'm hoping that Eddie Guerrero pops up on one of those.
I'm pretty sure if we do one of the Halloween Havocs I want to do, we're going to see some Eddie. So,
all right. Well, tell them when we're going to cover, because
97.
That's going to be coming out next. I want to say Wednesday.
It could be. We got the Final Four still to do coming up too, but we also have Halloween Havoc.
Oh yeah,
97.
Final Four is going to be coming out next Wednesday, and then the following week we'll do the Halloween Havoc 97.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm going to go Owen on this one just because of recency bias, and you know how it is on our 5th year. We say what we think, and honestly, if I had seen more Eddie matches more recently, I probably might have wavered more towards him.
Mm-hmm.
But let us know in the comments what you think.
Yeah.
You're about to hear what we think. We're about to hear what we think. Dave and I have been talking very generally about this because, like good friends, we don't want to talk anything deeper than funny sound bites we pulled out of this and holding all the recordings for the fans like we have for 5 years. Dave, let's get into the Mr. McMahon documentary. Just first, overall general thoughts about what you watched.
It's almost like watching two different documentaries, honestly, when you look at the first 5 episodes and then that final episode, which I kind of thought might be the case, because then that final episode, if you look at the first 5 episodes, you're almost looking at it like, at least I was, like, how did this guy survive all this stuff? And, you know, some of the stuff was questionable, but he looks almost like the good guy when it comes to like the steroid trial and everything like that, you know? And he, you know, he has that rough upbringing. And I think you could almost argue the first 5 episodes paint him in a favorable light, not just the entrepreneur that he is. But what I find is really ironic is when you get to episode 6, and that's one thing I'm going to say too. They were funny to me, at least. I'm sure some people didn't find them funny, but they had some very interesting edits in this show. And it's like one of them, like, was with Bruce Pritchard, who I thought was probably the one that got hurt the most out of this. Bruce is he's given his opinions on what he saw of the series so far, and he's blatant. He's Bruce that we hear on the podcast. And I thought it sucked. He said, I thought you turned into a gotcha piece, and I didn't think you concentrated on the humanity enough of Vince McMahon. And I disagree, because of those first 5 episodes, I thought, this is about what I've seen out there so far. I don't know why this would make them mad. You know? Well, hold on. Because now we're going to get to it. So Bruce is saying, you know, he's not an asshole. But then literally the next edit we see is 2 days later, the stuff with Janelle Grant comes out. And I was like, man, what a kind of a messed up way to make that edit for Bruce, who is admitting to, you know, this guy basically helped his wife when she had cancer. But that being said, this is also the reality. This is what happened. That was the timeline. And these are some horrible, horrible things that allegedly happened. And also what isn't alleged, those text messages were all very horrible. So,
but let's get back to.
I would say that so far. I know you want to talk, but basically I would say it's like 2 different. You watch the first 5, I got a totally different vibe until we got to 6. But go ahead.
Episode 6 was interesting because that whole Bruce thing does set off a lot of questions. Because when I heard that, I didn't feel it was a gotcha piece in the beginning. I thought it was a pretty good general chronicling of everything that happened. So many different things. He's saying you don't know the real Vince. Vince told us he didn't want to give us the real Vince. Time and time again said, I don't want to share that. I'm not going to share that. But then also complains that nobody knows the real him.
Mm-hmm.
I think the real him came out in between things where he said he felt like an outsider, where he said he felt weird. Just little offhand comments that he made that you're like, oh, this is a strange guy that has succeeded himself to a place where he's not going to get corrected or he's going to go unchecked. Right. And then you go blending it into a character that further, you know, kind of you lose the plot there. My main question is, what was the point of this documentary? Was it to get to know Vince? Was it to chronicle the rise of the WWE? I think the best thing that came out of it was this is the first time you got to see Vince talk for any length of time, and you got to hear him talk about a variety of subjects. Some he did well, some didn't come off as well. Oh. You can blame it on editing. I'm sure some of it is editing. Some is just what this guy said. Like when he talks about competition and, you know, when he sees you coming at him, he's going to crush you. Paraphrasing, that was the general feeling. He might have even said it worse. But it's like when you think about that in response to this lawsuit, you're seeing things like that. You saw it when he butted his way back into WWE.
Eric Bischoff nailed that, and he's nailed it before on his own podcast too. And Eric's a guy who's had a good relationship with Vince. I know he's not. He's calling publicly, you can't defend stuff that's out there now. But before that, he talked about his work relationship and the respect he had developed for Vince. But he's called him out on it still, despite that, and said that, the WCW, and we didn't raid WWE. We gave talent the option to work for us. We competed with them, which is the same thing Vince did with the territories, where he says, I competed with them. They didn't have the right. But when WCW did it and they were getting the better of him for a little while, he wasn't too fond about that. He turned it around. But hey, you know what? He turned it around and tried to play the victim. He always talked about billionaire Ted, because that's right. They addressed that too, that he was going at. Ted Turner was coming after him, which you could argue, is maybe a little dishonest. Maybe he's cheating a little bit. But there's a story there where Shane McMahon talks about wrestling with his dad and how he was getting the better of him, and his dad cheated. And he's like, you cheated. And Vince said, yes, sometimes I cheat to win. Sometimes you have to cheat to win. Remember that in business. And, it's like that all kind of goes together. You talked about things maybe editing, but also things not coming off well. The CTE thing. Like, we talked about this. I'd be remiss if I'll probably talk about this on one of the episodes again. I don't care.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be going through each episode, yes, breaking down how it progressed, trying to remember the greatest sound clips. I mean, who's going to forget? He grabbed my pecker.
But for me, I have to say the other thing is just his belief that The Undertaker didn't remember the match at WrestleMania 30 because he was so distraught over the streak being ending, rather than having an actual concussion, despite this fact this man couldn't remember his name or what fucking day it was. And they went to the hospital, and Vince went to the hospital with him. That blew my mind. Obviously, it's out there. Steve Austin, I'm not a CTE guy. That's incredible. I've always liked Stone Cold, but man, that's a bad take. No offense.
How about seeing Vince undercut Shane when brought with what Shane said during the interview? And it was one of those things where he seemed so dismissive, and you can almost see that weird dynamic there. And Shane comes off so normal too when talking about things.
Talking about doing things with his mom and storyline, and he was always reluctant because his mom is like sacred to him. We don't do that. That's a son. That feels like a son who's protective of his mom. Meanwhile, we got dad who wants to run an angle where he's impregnating his daughter. We've heard it before, but it's just like, this was not a normal family. And Shane is like the most normal one, I feel like, out of a bunch. He's protective of his sister. He's protective of his mom. He loves his family. And he wanted us to take over the business. And now Paul Heyman has a lot of stuff out here. I can't tell if Paul's working at different times. I feel like he is. But
I actually listened to a review podcast last night that cut out the Paul Heyman sound clips, and we'll get to that story, when we get to that episode, but so much. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was put together well. I thought the editing went well, where sometimes something at the start of an episode would relate somewhere later.
Yeah.
They hit the high points of Vince's life, in a very general sense. That's why I wanted to do the review episodes, because I don't know how much For instance, episode 1 is about Vince coming up. How much do you know about Vince's dad and Vince's dad's family?
I will leave this with this for those of you who want to check out the standalone episodes we're going to do. As far as episode 1 goes, I'm looking forward to talking about David Letterman. And I'm looking forward to talking about the guy, I don't know if you remember this, but we'll bring it up in that episode, that Vince McMahon, when he was looking to expand and he didn't want Bob Backlund, and he was looking for a guy with charisma that wasn't Hulk Hogan, the first guy he mentioned. I thought that was very interesting, too, just from a wrestling perspective, who Vince thought maybe would be good to, kind of lead the WWF at that time.
100%. And I'm going to drop some knowledge I have from reading the Ringmaster book that was written by Abraham Josephine Reisman. A very interesting look into the come up of Vince, and very interesting insights into his dad's family outside of Vince and how everything was perceived, because that was one thing I thought was lacking in this documentary series. Overall, I think we both enjoyed it. I have a couple non-wrestling fans at work or people that aren't as familiar with wrestling that want to check this out. So I'm interested in hearing what they think. But I am most interested not in Game Up yet, but in thanking Dave for, the ride along the last 5 years. We put in a lot of work. We thank each other, privately. We got to do it on the show because we're all fueled up with Game Up Hard Hydration.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store.
All you got young wrestling fans out there, listen, Owen Hart has got a book. It's called Wrestle. Like that. It's got some that good stories in there about some that good wrestlers.
Read stories of Dusty Rhodes, Devon Eric, Scott Casey, Sergeant Slaughter, Roddy Piper, Mr. Fuji, Ron Bass, Bruiser Brody, Mike Davis, The Grappler, and many others.
And I guarantee you one thing. That it'll be the best dadgum read you've had in a long, long time.
Get your book today at Russellville.com or on Amazon. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.
Read about the Northern Wrestling Federation in the book presented by Russellville.com, The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 2. Hear the story of Roger Ruffin, the man who trained Carl Anderson, the Monster Abyss, Jordan Clearwater, Chris Harrison, Jillian Hall.
Plus 45 other short stories including Jazz, Bobby Eaton, Kamala, Thunder Rosa, Mario Mancini, Scott Casey, PJ Black, Kerry Morton, Sal Renaro, Jeremiah Plunkett, Colby Carino, Bam Bam Malone, and many others.
Get your book today at Russellville.com. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.